Force of Will is an amazing card game, and if you already know how Magic the Gathering works, you can learn how to play Force of Will in about a minute and a half. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, and welcome to my video explaining to Magic players how Force of Will works and how you can translate your Magic the Gathering knowledge into Force of Will knowledge incredibly easy. When you get underneath the skin of it, Force of Will is pretty much just Magic. It really would almost be like a variant format of Magic. That's how you'll feel. It's got 5 colors. Surprise, let's list them off. White, red, green, black. Can you guess what the last one I'm going to say is? Yeah, it's blue. They got the exact same 5 colors, but they call them, green is like wind, for example. White is light. So they'll use different terminology, but the 5 colors are just like the 5 colors of Magic. They don't have the same kind of color pie though. So you'll find the abilities are distributed out amongst them. But anyways, let's talk about how this game works. First of all, Magic, you have 20 life. In this game, you have 4,000 life, but this is a game where they just use really big numbers. If you really boil it down, you're playing a game where you have 40 life, okay? Because every card uses everything in increments of 100. Basically, if you took Magic cards and added 2 zeros to them, then you would have how these cards work in terms of power and toughness. So, you start at 40 life. Obviously, just like in Magic, you can kill each other normally through damage. Deck death is also a way. If you run out of cards, you also lose the game. And there's a few cards in the game that have alternate win conditions printed on them, but there's not that many. So other than that, that's pretty simple in terms of the basic concept of how you want to win the game. Attacking with creatures is generally how it's done. There's a lot of burn spells like Magic. So the way that decks are comprised is, first of all, you have to have a J rule. And actually, before I get down to breaking down the decks, let me say this to you guys. This game already has pre-built decks available, okay? Now these decks are everything that you need to play, all good in one package, and unlike the pre-cons that are built by Wizards of the Coast, there's not like 2 copies of this, 3 copies of this, 1 copy of this. Everything in the deck, there's a 4 of. It's everything that you need, and on top of that, half of the deck will be foil as well. So every card you get 2 copies in foil, which is really nice too. So these are about 20 bucks Canadian. 20 bucks gets you the whole deck. You're good to go. Everything you need to play is in one of these. There's some older ones that come with booster packs as well, but I like these ones because they're nice and cheap and you get a whole deck. And the decks, they're not garbage decks. You know how Wizards makes precons that are no good? I've cracked some of these precons open and played with them straight out of the box, and they're surprisingly resilient. They're good decks. It's awesome. So how it works is very similarly to Commander. You know, in Commander, you pick someone to be your leader. Well, in this game, you have a ruler / J ruler, okay? And that's represented by a card that you'll start out with on the table as your main dude. Now, it has 2 sides. It has the regular ruler side, which you always start with face up, okay? So you start with the ruler side face up. Now, it has an ability that says Judgment on it, and what that means is pay the Judgment cost, which is the mana cost in this. Any cost of will is what they call mana in this game. So you pay the Judgment cost to flip the card to the other side, all right? So on one side, it's going to be things that help you out at the beginning of the game and abilities kind of the same way an enchantment works. And on the other side, it turns into a creature that enters the battlefield, all right? So that's how these work. In terms of your lands, you actually have 2 decks. So you will have one deck of 40 cards, which is your main deck that would have all your spells in it. And then you have another deck, which is the equivalent of your basic land deck. But instead, use things called stones. And these stones, as you can see here, they even have their own tap symbol on it, and it taps to produce a light mana. So this basically is like a plains from Magic, okay? Taps for a white mana. It even works the same. The cards tap just like they do in Magic the Gathering. Instead of using the words untap and tap, they use rest and recover. So rest is tap, recover is untap, all right? So that's how that works. In terms of these, you have a deck that you build separately from 10 to 20 cards. Your stone deck, your basic land deck, is 10 to 20 cards. And I keep saying basic lands, but that's just so you understand it's your land deck. There are special dual lands for this game as well that you can get for the deck, and you can use up to 4 of those. You can have any number of the 5 basic stones, just like basic lands, when it comes to dual lands or specials, you can only have 4 ofs, just like in Magic. So you'll see a lot of the information translates over. So you'll have a separate deck for your lands, your stones, and then you have your other deck, which is all your regular spells. Now, instants and sorceries are lumped into a category called chant, and they will just say quick cast if you can cast them at instant speed. So that's basically both instants and sorceries from Magic the Gathering. They also have enchantments. Those are called additions in this game, and artifacts are called regalia. And they pretty much work exactly the same way as they do in Magic. Enchantments generally will either enchant something, giving a bonus, or just sit on the table doing something, and artifacts will have activated abilities similar to Magic artifacts. So there's a lot of similarities. The creatures are very similar too, in that they have a power and toughness. Now, as I mentioned before, the power and toughness are done in increments of 100. Now, there are older cards where the power and toughness are printed on the bottom, but generally they're now printed along the side of the card, and the casting cost is located right up here at the top in the corner. So on the opposite side of the Magic card. So the Magic card would have it over here. Over here is where you find the casting cost, power and toughness listed at the side. Now, combat is one of the ways that the game is differentiated from Magic, in that you can attack the opposing player to do damage to them, but you can also attack any tapped creatures. Creatures in this game are called resonators, and when your ruler, the flipped over side of your ruler's out, it's called a J ruler. It's a little more special, obviously, than your everyday creatures. So, or a J resonator. I'm sorry, I said J ruler. It's also called a J ruler, but in terms of resonators, it's considered a J resonator. So just remember, resonator is creature. So it just takes a little bit of getting used to in terms of understanding that it's really just the same thing as Magic cards, just a different word you're using them. You're just calling them by a different name. So combat, you can attack both the opposite player and you can attack their tapped creatures, resonators. Any of the resonators that are out and tapped, you can attack them directly. On top of that, in Magic the Gathering, you announce all your attacking creatures at one time. In Force of Will, you do your attacks one at a time. You would declare each attacking creature, resolve that attack before moving on to the next attack. That's how that works. And if the blocking creature is removed before combat damage, unlike in Magic, the creature is no longer considered blocked and will still hit the opponent. So if I'm attacking you with my creature, and you block it, and then I unsummon your creature with an unsummon style spell, so that creature goes back to your hand, and there's no longer a creature blocking my creature, I get to hit you as if my creature had trample in Magic the Gathering. So that is an interesting difference. And a little side note to note is, if you ever go to declare an attack and you don't declare any attackers for any reason, then you're not allowed to declare attacks for the rest of the turn. But otherwise, you can declare as many attacks as you want. You can attack with each creature. Attacking it taps it, so you have to have an untapped creature to attack. But there's no limit to the number of attacks that can happen in a turn. Now, unlike in Magic, you don't hold the basic lanes in your hand. You will start with a starting hand of 5 cards that come off of your 40-card spell deck. But your stone deck, which is your land deck, will be separate. Now, one of the abilities of the J ruler is every turn you can tap your J ruler, rest it, to take the top card off your stone deck and put it straight into play. And they come into play untapped, so they come into play good to go. You can use them right away. So, unlike Magic the Gathering, where you can get mana screwed, you can never get mana screwed in this game where you're just not drawing lands, because every turn you have the ability to get a stone off the top of your deck. And there are some other cards that will also fetch stones out of the deck or play them off the top. So there are multiple ways to gain land, but the way that you're guaranteed is with the J ruler, which is very, very nice. So the J ruler, as I mentioned before, is something you can use their judgment ability. Some of them have something called the God's Art ability. You can only use that once per game. If you turn your J ruler into a creature on its resonator side and it dies, then it returns to its regular side for the rest of the game. And you can use the regular side of it, but you can never turn it back into a creature unless it has a special ability that states that. So basically, you start the game with your starting hand of 5 cards. You have your J ruler in play, okay? You have your 40-card spell deck on one side. You have your 10 to 20-card stone land deck on the other side. And then flip a coin to see who starts first. You're not allowed to decide who goes first. It happens randomly in this game. So first player is decided randomly. And then from that point, it will feel like a normal game of Magic. You draw a card each turn. You play cards as usual, by tapping what's essentially lands to cast spells, same colors even. You're going to tap a white land to cast a white spell. It uses colorless mana in the exact same way as colorless will, so that's going to feel very natural to you as well. One major difference is with the untap phase. How this game works is, there is a point during your turn, when your turn is started, where you are allowed to tap things before your untap phase. So instead of having to wait until the end of your opponent's turn to use your creatures with tap abilities, at the very, very beginning of your turn, you can tap creatures with tap abilities and then untap them. And that way they'll be untapped for the duration of your turn and your opponent's turn. And the reason this matters is, remember earlier I said that you can directly attack tapped creatures. So that will affect when and how you want to be tapping your creatures with tap abilities. So there are definitely some interesting strategic differences in the game. In terms of the cards, you will find that a lot of the cards are essentially just Magic cards reskinned. You can tell that they have been stealing heavily from Magic the Gathering. For example, Lightning Helix in Magic the Gathering is 1 red and 1 white for a spell that does 3 damage to any target and gives you 3 life. Well, Force of Will has the exact same spell. 2 mana, it does 600 damage to any target, and you gain 600 life. Now, if you boil it down, first of all, I just say 6 damage and 6 life. But because you're dealing with 40 life in Force of Will, instead of 20 like in Magic, all the damage is doubled. And the fun part about that is, you get to play with gigantic, massive, swingy spells. I know I told you guys to grab one of these decks. The most recent deck they just put out like a week or two ago, somebody let me look through it today, and it was amazing, guys. The cards that are in there are so incredible. There's a creature that you can put out, and you can put it out for 1 mana, and it's like a 4/4 or something like that, no big deal. Or you can cast it for 8 mana, and if you do, it does 20 damage to all your opponent's creatures, and it comes into play with 16 +1/+1 counters on it. It's just gigantic. And on top of that, the game reminds me of when Magic started. There are definitely some balancing issues. The colors aren't all perfectly balanced against each other. There's some swinginess. There's some busted cards that definitely need to be dealt with. But it's like the original Magic. You guys know the Lotus, the Power 9, all that stuff. That's all broken stuff they could never print now in Magic sets. We're living right now in the early days of Force of Will. And the game right now is struggling. They're not able to keep it on the shelves currently because they didn't make as much. It didn't sell as much. But if everybody goes out, starts grabbing it up, you can grab it up now cheap. You can have a whole bunch of it. If it turns out the game never goes anywhere, you've got this to play with, which is a lot of fun. And if it does go somewhere, you've got all this stuff you got in on the ground level. I intend to get right into this game. Now, I don't plan to stop playing Magic the Gathering. This is obviously a Magic channel, but I'm going to be showing Force of Will love here because this feels like Magic the Gathering back in the day. If you've ever wanted to play Magic back in the day, in the mid-90s, when it wasn't about prices, it was just about having the cards you wanted to play and playing the deck you wanted to play. And there's no massive net decking and all this because there can't be, because there's not as many people playing this game, guys. And the card quality is incredible. The artwork is so vivacious and full of life and colorful, and they don't have this agenda like Wizards does now. And I don't care about the agenda so much, just that when they're making garbage cards and they're spending their time worrying about making changes to like, now we're going to use the words they to be more inclusive, and we really want representation. And then you got Force of Will going, check it out, we put big tits on a dog. And like, look at this servant girl. This is her 5th pregnancy. Like, it's absurd. It's so far from Magic in terms of the parts I don't like about Magic, and so close to the parts that I do love about Magic. It's all just about rotating rectangles and playing with friends. I entreat you, my friends, join me in this game. It's cheap to get into. Imagine getting a whole deck with 2 foil copies of all the super rares and all the mythics and everything for 20 bucks, being good to go out of the box, and it being actually competitive. You know how Wizards of the Coast says they make challenger decks? Well, these are challenger decks, man. The newest precon, the one that just came out, it came 2nd place in yesterday's tournament, played by somebody who hadn't even seen it before yesterday, really, okay? That's how good this stuff is. So come play with me. Have some fun. Go look at the Force of Will cards online, all right? Go look at them. Tweet the ones that you think look cool at me. We're going to do videos talking about how much fun it is. I'm really excited. I know I'm just a noob. It's not like Magic the Gathering where I'm an expert. This is a noob's perspective. So, if I missed anything, I'm sorry if I didn't give you all the details. I hope that you found it informative. Take a look at the game. It's fantastic. Come play it with me. I plan to go out to the bigger events that they have. They have a big event going on in Toronto, and it's only 100 people, guys. So even the biggest events will be like small get-togethers at first, where we can all help to build this game and make it into something. And because the company is online for the whole life of the game, we can help shape this. Their YouTube channel is the same size as mine right now, guys. Think about that for a second. We can build this into our own game. We can help them shape this into something where we all enjoy it, where it's about playing and having fun. Because in the end, a card game should be about two things: having fun and having cool cards. That's all I ever wanted, guys. So come have fun with me. And thanks for stopping by.
Hey kids, it's me, Jumbo the Monkey. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. I bet you liked your magical sleep time drink. And remember, together, we're the sixth color of magic.